Morning, everyone. I believe, except for right over there, just sneaked in, I got to meet everybody personally. My name is Kathleen Ballman. I'm a critical care clinical nurse specialist. Just to give you an idea, I've got a bunch of initials after my name. This is a Master's of Science in Nursing. This is a certification as a clinical nurse specialist. So there's 4 advanced practice nurses in the United States: the clinical nurse specialist, the nurse practitioner, the nurse anesthetist, and the nurse midwife. And so I'm the clinical nurse specialist one. I was inducted in the College of Critical Care Medicine in the United States, and I was also inducted into the Institute for Clinical Nurse Specialists and the American Academy of Nursing. Keeps me out of trouble. I'm also the president of the World Federation of Critical Care Nurses. So hopefully if Kuwait develops a critical care nursing society, you guys can think about joining the World Federation. And part of our mission is really focused on elevating critical care nursing around the world, specifically in assisting with education and standards and things like that. Everything is free on our website. We do that on purpose because the focus is elevation to low and middle income across the world. So I am a very interactive speaker. So I'm going to engage you in this journey of talking about staff empowerment and also advocacy, because what I've discovered is nursing is way more similar around the world than we are different. I have consulted in Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, South Africa, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, so literally across the globe, and I find we are far more similar than we are different in having some of the same challenges of creating that empowered work environment. There are 2 reasons why nurses stay in nursing and in the environment they're at. One is the work culture, and the second one is usually finances. Those are the top 2. Now, I can't control the finance. I wish I could, but I can work with you to talk about how we can create that work culture that creates an individual. You can't empower somebody, but you can create a culture that supports them to feel empowered, to own their practice and be the best nurse and advocate that they can be. So that's where we're going to spend our time. I spent 10 years frontline as a critical care nurse, 13 as a clinical nurse specialist for the medical ICUs at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan. And that's where a lot of my theories and work began, because I walked into a work culture that was not pretty. It was definitely not pretty. And within 2 years, we were able to change it. And that was with no nurse manager. She quit 2 weeks after I hired in. And so I had an assistant nurse manager and myself, and we were able to do it. So when people say, I can't do this, I say, yes, you can, as a part of it. Also, so you're not going to go crazy writing notes, because I have a lot of references and things on my slides. I will post this on my website. So all you have to do is www.vollman, my last name, VOLLMAN.com. Go under the education section, under downloads, and give me a couple hours after I finish, and I'll have it posted on there for you, so that you have references and all the necessary things as a part of it. So www.vollman.com. All right, let's get started. Oops, little guy doesn't want to move. Oh, did I turn it on? Yeah, that wasn't. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Pressing the wrong one. All right. I'm not sponsored by anybody to speak. Just to let you know, I am a consultant or subject matter expert on CAUTI, urinary tract infections from a catheter, bloodstream infections from a catheter, pressure injuries. So very fundamental, but critical nursing care to prevent patient harm, as well as sepsis. So I'm teaching, my teachers in the room, you get objectives, right, as a part of that journey. What I want to do is explore some of the practical strategies for empowering your ICU staff or your nursing staff or your students or your faculty, whatever environment you're in, to enhance team collaboration and resilience as a part of our journey. And to highlight, and this is a global nurse issue, is you ask the average nurse, what do you own as a professional registered nurse? And they have trouble describing that. They'll describe the medical component of their practice, but they have real challenges describing what they uniquely own. And therefore, it makes it difficult for them to feel valued because their practice is then connected to another versus what they own. So I'm going to talk to you about that. And this is something I recommend going into schools, recommending it being part of organizational orientation as a part of that journey, and I have published on it. And then really what kind of tools are available for you to evaluate your work culture and be able to then start moving forward on the various challenges you may be having as a part of it. In the United States, our healthcare is looking at what is called the quadruple aim. It's always lower costs, but you want to improve the patient experience, you want to have better outcomes, but they added this one because it used to be the triple aim. And now it's the quadruple aim because they recognize that clinicians are getting burned out, our physician colleagues as well as the nursing colleagues. And it is important for us to ensure that we create a good experience for them so they want to stay in their job and feel fulfilled as part of that. So work engagement, it's actually defined as a positive, satisfying, work-related state of mind. And so we're going to focus on the nursing engagement component as a part of that. So what are some factors that chip away at nurses? Oftentimes we think it may be the communication between physicians and nurses, but there's also what is called lateral violence. That is how nurses talk to each other as a part of it. And is there a challenge with respectful communications? And what I frequently ask nurses when I talk with them, when was the last time you had any form of a communication course? Yeah, speaking to others. How do I speak to others? How do I speak to patients? It was probably nursing school. Yeah, nursing school. So there's this concept that we just have magic fairy dust sprinkled over us, that we know how to communicate. It's a skill, like heart failure management, or taking care of COPD or ethics. How do I manage ethical communications and things like that? It is a skill as equally as important. So one of the strategies is ensuring that there is education related to that, but also including that in people's performance appraisal. So it's not just how they act clinically, but how they communicate and foster that team relationship. So they are held equally as responsible and accountable for that communication as they are for any of their clinical skills, because it is equally as important as a part of it. The communication issues, guys, are 77% of the reason why errors occur. So why would we not focus on that as an important? What I have discovered, and I'll delve into this a little deeper, is if we don't feel respected, we have trouble advocating because we end up being quiet. And when we are quiet, how well can we advocate for our patient to ensure the right thing happens? We can't. And so that's a really important component. And one of the major reasons why we leave the profession, burnout, job dissatisfaction, and there's the concept of moral distress as a part of this as well. But I'm not going to go heavy into that because I'm going to leave that for my colleague. Oh, wrong way. All right. If nurses feel belittled. In other words, may I ask, is there yelling that occurs in your environment? Be real, yeah. So what do you do when that happens? When somebody yells at you? Most of the time, okay, it's okay. This is,
I don't feel comfortable, I wish I could.
you don't, yes, that's, so, hello, that is perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Did everybody hear that? Yeah. So most of the time we freeze, right? Because I remember the first time it happened to me. I was raised with 5 brothers. So my speaking and all of that was pretty direct and straightforward. We discussed things in our family. We didn't yell at each other. So the first time I was yelled at, I actually looked over my shoulder to see if they were yelling at somebody else, because it was not a behavior I was familiar with. But I was stunned. But I went home, thought about it, came back and started observing that behavior in the environment, and I go, I've got to do something, because I can't let this happen to me all the time. So what I did, besides taking a community college course on communication, what I did is I came up with a statement that I practiced in front of a mirror so it would directly come out of my mouth when it happened. Does anybody have a statement that they use? This is critical, guys. I gotta tell you. If there is that level of disrespect in the environment, that is a huge, huge component of the challenges we face. So my statement, and feel free to write it down, this conversation is over until you can speak to me as a professional. And by the way, yelling at somebody, automatic write-up. There is, in the science of patient safety, zero tolerance of that behavior because it is directly connected to errors and patient safety issues. And because, who's the largest group of clinicians in an environment? Nurses, right? So, who should own what that communication looks like in that environment? We should. And so therefore we need to teach those skills to the colleagues we work with and to the new nurses that are coming in the profession so that they're able to address that as a part of it. And then the other component is a poor quality of work environment. And that means I'm always being told what to do instead of engaged in the development of things. And so we're gonna dissect all of this and provide some strategies along the way. All right, so what happens when we get good level nursing engagement? It influences the patient experience. I don't have the exact quote, but it is very hard to give compassionate care when the well is dry, when the personal well is dry. And so we, by having that engagement and feeling more fulfilled, we're able to transfer that in our patient experience. Improvement in clinical quality, direct connection, improvement in patient outcomes, improvement in nurse retention, reduces compassion fatigue and burnout, and overall improves teamwork. That's pretty powerful when you think about it. So it makes sense why we would want to focus on this as part of that journey. The impact of disengaged nurses. 15 out of every 100 nurses are disengaged. This is worldwide figures. And by the way, some of this is also in the United States. We got the same problem, guys. We've got the same problem everywhere. So if people don't think it's worth the money to invest in doing this process, you can lose significant productivity by not having an engaged nurse, and that costs you money. It also impacts how your patients experience their hospitalization, and so experience scores are significantly reduced, and then you have turnover. And in the United States, a critical care nurse turnover costs $120,000, because that's what it takes to get the next one in and go through the orientation, because we don't have a postgraduate critical care like Australia and New Zealand, where they go to a year class. Orientations are run separately by the individual hospitals. Come on in. chair there, chairs over there, welcome. So, engagement versus burnout, there are inherent rewards. This is why, I don't know about you, but I don't think I walk in the morning and walk in the evening and go, I want to cause harm today with my patient. I want it to be a nasty, no, I'm not doing that. Inherent is, I'm working to save lives, help families, and yes, I need to pay my bills. That's a part of it. The inherent stresses, the sense of responsibility, the complexity of the patients we manage, scheduling, and I gotta tell you, one of the big ones is dysfunctional systems. And what I discovered through my experience is that if the organization is having chaos, my nurse manager and I would partner and we would say, let's circle the wagons. That's an old phrase from the American West. Circle the wagons to protect our staff from the muck that was going on at the institutional level, because I don't have the power to impact that. So when I look at this, I look at what can you influence. So if I'm a staff nurse, what do I have the capability of influencing? If I'm the manager, what do I have the capability of influencing? So what is my sphere of influence? So I'm gonna go through these, but we're gonna break them down. Work environment, culture. That is, as I said, one of the big ones. Nursing characteristics or mobility. These are some of the factors influencing job satisfaction and staying power. I'm not sure, are you guys going through older nurses retiring? We have a big retirement component. Are you guys running into that in England? Yeah, there's reaching I think the average age of the nurse in the United States is 54 or something like that, so, same here, okay. And also, the generational learning, and my professor over there can tell me, if you're running into different generations of nurses, the ones right now, at least we're experiencing in the United States, are completely different than what are called the baby boomers. And the baby boomers have loyalty, organizational loyalty, and all of that kind of stuff. The ones coming in now, not so much as a part of it. And then organizational characteristics. Is there fairness? What's the professionalism? Is there career commitment as a part of it? And what does my local manager behave? Because in terms of staying and creating that culture, that frontline manager is critical. So you run in the cath lab, absolutely critical to whether and the environment that you create as a part of it. So, what is a culture? Has anybody heard this phrase before? That's not the way we do it here. Yeah? Because we've always done it this way? Yeah. So that's how I used to define culture before they created an actual definition for it. And it was Peter Provedos that created this definition. The culture represents a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, practices, and behaviors that makes one unit distinct from the next. So do any of you, have you ever been pulled to another unit, to work in another unit? Okay, so do you recognize that the culture is different from the unit you came from? So we had 32 units in our hospital. They had 32 separate cultures. So that's why understanding what you influence is an important component of this journey. So the first step in this is, how do you assess the culture? So prior to, there's now official tools that help us assess the culture. But this was one of the ways, before there were tools, how I assess the culture. And one was, can you change practice through process improvement alone? And does it stick? And if it doesn't, then you know the underlying culture needs to be addressed. So that's one strategy. One of the official tools is called the Safety Attitudes Questionnaire. This is available for free, guys. It's on the AHRQ website, the American Hospital Research and Quality website. And by the way, in Google, you can literally put in Safety Attitudes Questionnaire and it will come up. And it will share with you the publications that go with this tool. And this is not just for nurses, this is the entire team. And most hospitals in the United States now do this yearly. So they get a global look of what's going on at the hospital culture level, and then the individual units get their own data to be able to work on these components of teamwork, safety, working conditions, job satisfaction, stress recognition, and then they separate out upper management and unit management because they recognize the significance of the difference between those two in how it influences the work culture. So this is one of the tools. Interesting enough, you want to strive for 80%. If your score is less than 60%, it's directly associated with negative clinical outcomes. So when they did the big CLABSI initiative, they did it in the state of Michigan. So they did it in the state I lived in. And what they were able to show, teamwork and the actual CLABSI rates were directly correlated with the culture, which makes total sense to me as a part of it. Now, here's another one. Again, this is free. This is from the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. It's the Healthy Work Environment Self-Assessment Tool. Come on in if you're in the nursing workshop. We're taking all comers. This one, you email AACN, they will send you, the staff takes it anonymously, sends it back to AACN, they then send you the data. You cannot start to change your culture unless you're aware of the one you live in. So that's why it's important to have data. They just came out with their second set of healthy work environment standards, the updated ones. It involves skill communication, true collaboration, effective shared decision-making, appropriate staffing, meaningful recognition, and authentic leadership. And there are components under each of these that you can evaluate. And I don't know if the actual book costs something, but there's a number of publications on this that you can get the data sufficient. And I gave you an idea here. For those that came in late, not late, I don't want to make you feel bad. For those that came in after I started, how's that? That's better? This PowerPoint will be on my website at www.vollman, my last name, VOLLMAN.com, under the education section. So that you'll have all these references to peruse at your leisure. So there are driving components in the work culture. The nurse, because we are the largest number in that culture, and then how we play together as a team with our multidisciplinary colleagues. Those are really the two driving components. So I'm going to talk about us first. So I don't know if this is the case here in Kuwait, but in the United States, registered nurses are the #1 respected profession. Not the case here. Okay. Well, it is in the US, but it doesn't feel like it. But 365 million people, granted it's a random sample, view us as the most respected profession. Our physician colleagues, so we're at 82%, our physician colleagues are at 67%. Pharmacy's at about 64%. So it's quite a difference. But the interesting thing is, and this is in the US, but I also find it around the world, is even though we're the most respected profession, the nurses in the profession don't feel respected. So that is a huge dichotomy when you have people viewing you as respected and the humans in it don't feel it. And so whenever I run into this stuff, I have my aha moment. and I start then asking myself these questions. And have I ever felt disrespected? The answer is once. That time that I was yelled at, and then I figured out how to address it, I have had a gazillion attempts of disrespect. It's whether you allow it to happen or not, or you stop that level of disrespect. Because I gotta tell you, this is the one thing that chips away at your self-esteem as a human, is the level of disrespect that repetitively happens in our environment if you don't address it. And it can be quite small, but build up over time that creates it. So we wanna go about reclaiming that professional respect, and I think we can do it in two ways. By the work culture we create, but also by the individual quality care that I deliver to my patient, so I have a level of pride related to that. So I want to ask you guys, and I warned you ahead of time, I'm a fairly interactive speaker, so this is one of those interaction pieces. I'm going to ask you, what are some behaviors or communications that make you feel respected? You can do it. Yes, when you feel, you and the patient, you and a doctor, you and another nurse, what makes you feel a level of respect?
Talking to him directly, explaining everything. Sometimes between us, like one time happened to me when I talked to the patient, he refused to do the procedure. And I asked him, he told me the truth and he liked the doctor. I felt like he trusted me more than the doctor.
So you felt good about that? Yeah. Do you, when somebody makes eye contact with you when you're talking, do you feel more respect? Yeah. Have any of, what's another form of respect? When somebody acknowledges what you've done, or ask your opinion. By the way, they don't even have to take my opinion, but they ask my opinion. I feel respected then. What are some of the communications or behaviors that make you feel disrespected? They ignore. And so one, no eye contact, or something else is going on. So what do you do when you're ignored? Okay, but what if that affects patient safety? Because that's oftentimes when we're trying to escalate something, because we're right next to that human being, and we're trying to advocate for that person, and we get ignored. So, this is where you come up with those little statements. Excuse me, I need your attention. This is about a patient issue that's going to affect their safety. And by the way, if they still ignore me, what do? Bingo, chain of command. Do not, so have any of you ever gone home with a pit in your stomach? That pit in your stomach, yeah? That pit in your stomach is unresolved advocacy. You have not been able to advocate effectively because of things in the environment. So you go home and this pit goes, and then what does your brain do? Meh, right? You go over and over and over it again saying, oh, what could I have done different? And by the way, that makes you feel smaller and smaller and affects your overall strength and confidence in your ability to do the right thing for the patient. So have any of you, and by the way, this is not just doctor, nurse, have any of you given a report to somebody who wasn't paying attention? They were on their phone? Normal life, yeah, they may not be paying attention to you. So what do? So there's two strategies that people use. They speak in a louder voice or they shut up and wait until the person lifts their head up. He goes, why did you stop talking? Okay, so I recommend the be quiet, but I recommend that you add a statement to that. When they finally look up at you, you then say to them, I stopped talking because you weren't listening. Handoff is a critical safety event. I need your attention. And by the way, if I have that conversation with you twice and you do it the third time, where does it go? Up the chain of command. Because on that kind of behavior, rolling the eyes, tone of voice, being ignored, I give people 2 strikes and you're out. Then I move it up the chain. Anger, yelling, automatic. Automatic right up and move up the chain because that affects your self-esteem the most as a part of that journey. And there was a study, granted this was done a while ago, but I feel respected. This was nurses interviewed. I feel respected when I'm listened to, revered for my knowledge, feel part of a group, I'm acknowledged, sense of belonging, we look out for each other, there's fairness. As a result, I feel a freedom to speak and then an opportunity to excel. If I'm not being respected, I'm disregarded, not revered, not trusted, not supported, closed out of conversations. I've had some fun with that one. This was in the 90s. The medical rounds, they're actually patient rounds, not medical rounds. They're patient rounds. And the doctors were all in a circle and they wouldn't let nursing in. So I would be like, every time they moved to a new patient, I'd be wiggling myself right next to the attending physician as a part of it. Because I wanted to role model that behavior to the staff I was working with so that they saw it. Spoken to a demeaning tone, you gotta call people on their tone too. May I ask, have anybody ever experienced somebody rolling their eyes at you? Do you all know what rolling your eyes means? I don't give a bejeebies about what you just said, right? Exactly. So by the way, rolling your eyes, you gotta call people on it. Because guess what? They're clueless that they do it. They don't even know. So you have to say, excuse me, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but when I said that, you rolled your eyes. Was that your intent? We have to have those kind of conversations if we're going to make our cultures the way they need to be. And when this doesn't happen, guys, guess what I do? I protect myself. It's a psychological principle of guarding in order to protect myself. And when you guard, what happens to your ability to advocate? It goes down as a part of it. So there's 2 things I learned about respect. Self-respect and respect are deeply connected. So if a nurse says to me, I don't feel respected, it basically means their self-respect has been hammered. And there's 2 components to self-respect. The communication we have inside ourselves and how well we filter what other humans say to us. So the communication we have with ourselves, this is a worldwide issue in nursing. We have some of the most lack of confident dialogue with ourselves. I don't know this, what is this, blah, 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 blah. And we run this in our head. We need to smack our own head or something to stop that kind of dialogue. We need to flip it around to be, it's okay, I've got a colleague over here. If I don't, I can look this up here. We have to have that better, more confident dialogue. And then the other is, how well do we filter what other people say to us? Oh, somebody said something to me. Oh, they've said it twice now. It must absolutely be true. No. You have to evaluate that. And I'm going to share a story with you. How am I doing on time? Yeah, we're okay. We got another hour. All right, good. This story, it was the mid-90s in the United States. And at that point in time, we were doing something called patient-focused care, where they had nursing techs inserting NG tubes, urinary catheters, suctioning, which all of those require assessment skills. So therefore, it was going against the Nurse Practice Act. Now, I had very good outcomes in my unit, so I told my colleagues, my advanced practice colleagues, I will chair our committee, because I knew I was going to have to push up against upper leadership, because they were the ones running this program. So on the day this happened, I was in nursing administration at the copy machine, and the chief nursing officer walked in and goes, got a minute? And I'm like, sure. And so I walk into her office and we sit at a round table. And I'm thinking, oh, this is good, because she also has a big desk and a little chair. So you know when you're at the big desk, little chair, it's gonna be a different conversation. Same the world over. So she begins to talk to me and then she looks at me and she goes, I need you to stop leading. Yeah, that's the face I made, probably. And I'm like, okay, where is this going? My hands are on the table like this, and I'm, And she proceeded to tell me I didn't know myself well enough in order to help other people lead. By the way, I had 5 organizational projects. This was a 650-bed hospital. Do you think there were other projects going on? Yeah. So, and I was having out-of-body experience because she told me to stop leading. So basically that means I am a leader. So I'm having this conversation with myself. She literally gets up, goes to the filing cabinet, pulls out a Myers-Briggs personality test and says, you need to take this on yourself. Now I could have told her I was a TJ whatever, but I was not winning here because I had 0 legitimate power. So my mouth was, and my hands were like this. And then she continues on, and then she looks at me and she goes, and sometimes it's time for people to go. Best outcomes in the hospital. And this is when it was very beneficial to be raised with 5 brothers. I broke eye contact, and then I looked at her and I said, I'm not quite finished yet. I'll let you know when I'm ready to go. Is the meeting over? Backed up, walked out of the office. The reason why I'm telling you this story, that could have destroyed me as a professional registered nurse. Within a half hour, I was on the phone to my sister, who was a nurse leader in California, to run the whole thing by her, and she goes, you better not pay attention to that. There is some funky power stuff going on. And I did the same thing with a colleague that same day that I trusted, and she said the same thing. So it's important to filter correctly because it can affect you. So if you need people to help you filter appropriately, please consider doing that as a part of it. So the internal and external dialogue. And so when we look at creating a culture of respect, develop effective methods for responding to disrespectful episodes, anger, automatic write-up, that statement I shared with you, rolling eyes, I gave you all those different kinds of strategies. Initiate cultural changes to prevent those episodes. So that's what this whole workshop is about in the beginning here, is to talk about how we can change that culture. Get a code of conduct. If your organization doesn't have one, create one in your unit and get every nurse to sign it as a part of it. And I would also get the physicians to sign it too if you can. And culture of respect really requires building a shared vision, and that is done multidisciplinary. I found this poem that I really liked. I spoke, you listened. I felt valued and honored. You shared your opinion, you trusted your wisdom. The circle of respect was complete. We saw in each other's eyes our common humanity, now moving to a zone of mutual affirmation. We felt safe to trust and learn and nurture in the give and take of life. I want that in my work environment. I want that in my home. I even want it in my grocery store. So we want to create that across the board. So how do we get that? It's done at the grassroots level, and you do it by revaluing and recognizing nursing's unique contribution so that nurses feel a value for what they independently do, and then engagement in the safety climate with our colleagues as a part of that journey. So creating an environment that fosters autonomy, nurse sense of control over their own practice. Has anywhere in Kuwait developed shared governance? The concept of shared governance? No, okay. So shared governance is shared decision making. You don't need to do it at an organizational level to do it at a unit level. You can start your own practice committee at the unit level, because what's the likelihood leadership's going to turn and go, no, don't improve practice? They're not going to say that. They're gonna say, sure. And so then you focus on working on projects based on data in the environment to help you feel like you have a sense of control. And it's done through that practice leadership. And then more staff engagement over their work. Is there, and you run the cath lab, do you schedule everybody or do they do self-scheduling? Nurses, you schedule that. So one of the things in the United States is something called self-scheduling. It's also done over in Australia and the UK. It's where the nurses fill out their schedule, but they're also made responsible. There's usually a staffing committee that balance it and then give it to the manager, and the manager finalizes it and fills in the holes so that there is, again, a sense of this ownership of your own practice. And you want to make sure that there's time to participate in various activities. So let's talk about this concept of what do I own as a professional registered nurse? Florence got this. You know, Florence, we're first aid basis. She knew surveillance and monitoring of patient condition for early detection of problems. Failure to rescue, sound familiar? Preventing complications, never events. Those were written in 1869. Huh? Yeah. She wrote this, I use nursing, the word nursing for want of a better. It has been limited to signify little more than the administration of medicines and the application of poultices, by the way, which are dressings or treatments. How many of you feel like a taskmaster? Medications, dressings and treatments, and labs. It ought to signify the proper use of fresh air, light, warmth, cleanliness, quiet, the proper selection and administration of diet, all at the least expense of the vital power to the patient. And the sentence that follows that, it is the role of the nurse to put the patient in the best condition for nature to heal them. Our job is really this concept of preventing harm to our patients. And she wrote this, so deep-rooted and universal is the conviction that to give medicine is to be doing something, or rather everything, but to provide the warmth, cleanliness, and light is to do nothing. Let me give you a modern take on this. Mobility in hospitalized patients, ICU, and overall hospitalized patients. The outcomes for doing good mobility are massive. Reduction in skin injury, reduction in delirium, shorter time in the ICU, shorter time in the hospital, less chance of going to a rehab hospital, less pneumonia. I mean, I can name it. If that was in a pill, all those outcomes in a pill, how many patients in the hospital would be on that medication? Every single one of them. How successful are you guys at getting mobility happening? It's not easy because the resources are not there, all of these other things. So you see the weight that is placed on things, but it's up to us to articulate the importance of these components of our practice to make sure the right thing happens to our patient as a part of it. Because we have data around the world called missed nursing care. Any aspect of required patient care that is either admitted in part or whole or significantly delayed, and it is directly connected to negative patient outcomes. And me, in my perfect world, I love to be able to say, flip the narrative from all the negative to the actual, look what happens when mobility happens. Instead of, we get this many falls, we get this many whatever, measuring mobility versus the number of people that fall as a part of it. So it may be a little difficult to see, but here's oral care, the most missed, and here's ambulation, the most missed. Those two things, pneumonia, on the oral care, can't eat right. On the mobility, again, pneumonia, DVT, pressure injuries, I mean, you name it. So by focusing on what we need to be doing, but it gets missed. And interesting enough, the group that is looking at this, there's an international learning collaborative that's focused on the fundamentals and bringing them back to the universities and to acute care. They talk about what happens with the fundamental care. It gets rationed out because the psychological principle is you focus on what you're reprimanded for. And you're reprimanded for not giving a med, not following a doctor's order, not getting those labs. Anybody talk to you about the oral care or mobilizing your patient? Not individually that day. So you focus on what is focused on and the other gets rationed out. So we have to change the way that culture looks. So Florence got this, reconnecting with our professional purpose. It may seem a strange principle to enunciate that the very first requirement in a hospital is to do the sick no harm. So there's no question in my mind, our advocacy role equals safety. But when I talk with nurses around the world, and I'm going to ask you, how do you define your advocacy role? Your patient advocacy role? Oh, I forgot that. You guys are new to the group, and warn you, I'm a fairly interactive speaker. Come on, there's no right or wrong answer. How do you define your advocacy role? Preventing falls. The other kind of component, what I hear from nurses most of the time, is I push up the chain of command to make sure the right thing happens for my patient, that I am the voice of the patient. Most of the time, they don't answer preventing falls, the harm piece. They don't answer that I do an intervention of turning a patient in bed to prevent a pressure injury. They don't see it that way. They see the medical side of pushing up the chain of command. So I want you to start to connect to that autonomous piece. So what are the things we do that protect bad things from happening to patients on our watch during the time they're with us? They involve, that we own independently, they involve two things: a broadened definition of hygiene and mobility. And I gotta tell you, in the world of critical care, those are not sexy interventions. They're just not exciting compared to the ECMO or the latest cardiovascular procedure or the newest ventilatory mode. So I tried to make it a little more exciting by creating a term called interventional patient hygiene. Like interventional radiology, interventional cardiology, yeah. But in all seriousness, guys, when you look at the definition of hygiene in the dictionary, it is the science and practice of the establishment and maintenance of health. Does it get any more fundamental than that? So when you put an action verb in front of it, what it says is I am proactively intervening with evidence-based hygiene and mobility strategies to eradicate 3 of the top 4 errors in the world: healthcare-acquired infections, falls, and pressure injuries. That is so much more powerful than a yank the Foley over here, a clean the hands over here, clean the mouth over here, because that's how it's coming at you. Do any of you in your practice audit nursing practice? Do you do auditing? Go around and check to see that things are getting done? What I would ask you to think about is auditing collectively for nursing. So not just for the CLABSI, not just for the CAUTI, not just for the pressure injury, but put it all together on a form. Put the form in your pocket, walk into the room, and look at the nurse and say, how are we going to prevent harm in this patient today? Because it allows them to focus holistically on the human being. And it also forces critical thinking. Then you can take the thing out of your pocket once you leave the room and check stuff off because you know what you're looking for. So the audit still takes place, but you're having a different encounter of coaching that shows the importance of these care practices. And this is all published, by the way. I'm a pictorial learner. Patient in the center, the blue is fundamental nursing care activity that does not require a physician's order. And the red are the nurse-sensitive outcome indicators. oral care mobility for vet pneumonia and non-vet pneumonia, because both are equally bad, high mortality rates. Catheter care, do I put one in? When was the last time somebody watched me put one in? How do I care for it, and do I work at getting it out? Central line, am I present when it's inserted? Do I stop the doctor if the sterile procedure is not done correctly? The answer is yes to that, by the way. How do I dress it? How do I access the site for catheter, for Caudy and Clapsy? But probably your largest effect is how I care for the skin. And I apologize, it's missing in here, nutrition, bathing, and mobility. Because that impacts Caudy, Clapsy, surgical site, deep vein thrombosis, falls, and I don't call it pressure injury prevention anymore. You know why? Because when I say the word pressure, where does your head go in a bed-bound patient? To the butt and offload. So the moisture, the shear, the device-related all get forgotten. So I call it eliminating hospital-acquired skin injuries as a part of it, a more comprehensive look. So, taking this all together, how do I get that evidence used in practice? Well, I build the value. I've now given you a connection to this prevention of harm. That's building the value. Because if I just taught you the skill and knowledge without building the value, yeah, it's like a Band-Aid. And what happens to Band-Aids? They fall off. That's why it's tough to sustain some of these improvements. And the other piece is, do I have the right resource and system to make the right thing happen for the patient? So in the United States, I'll give you an example. Non-ventilator pneumonia is the #1 infection in our hospitals. Most hospitals have a toothbrush that I would not even use in the grout in my shower to clean, and toothpaste that has no therapeutic benefit whatsoever, fresh mint. So how, as a practitioner, am I going to achieve those outcomes if I don't have the right tools to be able to do it? So when all of these are together, I have no problem holding people accountable for the care practice. If the pieces are missing, then it's going to be a challenge. So what am I going to do in my unit to start building up that culture? The shared governance model. If you can't do it at your hospital, do it at the unit level and a unit practice committee. Do you have a clinical ladder? In other words, a way if you professionally develop, you get paid more money. Does that exist in some of the places? Yes, so it does exist in some places and not in others. That's a very important thing because you can then reward frontline staff for engaging in their own professional development and the quality of the unit. Unit-based leadership model. May I ask, is the nurse manager and the medical director at equal level? That's a challenge. So in most leadership models, the goal is to have them at equal level so that when practices, communications, and things are discussed, they get discussed equally in solving the problem. So it's not just this, which can often happen as a part of that. Is there educational support? You guys are here. Are you getting supported to come to this and learn and in other things as well? And then, do you have some type of quality improvement model that you can use on your unit, like Plan, Do, Check, Act? Something that allows you to measure what you did before, change your practice, and then measure what you do after. And if you don't, these are things that are all available on Google. You can get them off of Google. And it doesn't require your manager to say, oh, you must. This is something, as a practicing nurse, you see a problem, you see it more than once. You start to see a trend, you say, let me grab a piece of paper and collect how many times this is happening. So in quality improvement, 15 patients around a care practice gets you within 3% of the routine way the care is delivered. So it doesn't have to be months and months of data collection. So it's doable for us. So in the shared governance component, the biggest part, so we, in our group, we elected people into the positions. So we had staff representing the day shift, representing the night shift, the manager and myself as a clinical nurse specialist were on the committee, but everybody had a single vote. And we also had a flip chart, so we were able to put the information up there so people would then be able to effectively vote. Because I gotta tell you, if you have a group of 6 or 7 people that come up with the practice or the project or whatever, it's gonna be far more accepted than whether you just hand it down. Because that means your peers are participating. And each of those members had what are called staff constituents. So they communicated with 8 or 9 staff that were connected to them. So the staff could bring up issues that would get to this meeting, and anything that was discussed here could then go out to them. So you had strong communication happening as part of it. So in order to effectively do this, the staff do need coaching as a part of it. You need to define what the accountability is for members in terms of attending, as well as participating in this process. In my perfect world, because that's where I live, and I work really hard to get everybody else to hang in my perfect world, if you could have a 4-hour meeting once a month, you would get a lot done. If it's an hour meeting, it becomes what I like to call an FYI, where information is only going one way and it's not being solved. It's just a sharing meeting, and you don't want that. You want a working meeting. And so you put your nurse-sensitive outcome data on this meeting. You put unit issues on this meeting, and then whatever quality improvement project you're working on. So I gave you a picture of what it could look like. So, my perfect world. It's actually a triad. You've got the medical director, the nurse manager, and then a clinical lead. And I'm the clinical lead as the clinical nurse specialist. Each of these go out into the system to then make change that happens back at the unit, but they are the unit leadership. Then the triangle that's around them is that unit governance council, so that the staff intersect all of them. Make sense? That's an empowered unit. So in order to do this, you gotta have good communication among your peers and your multi-professional team, good communication from local leadership as a part of it, and that's what equals a healthy culture. And so where does nursing get stuck? Right here. If their self-respect is hammered, their confidence to communicate goes down. Our confidence to communicate goes down effectively. If we can't communicate effectively, how can we advocate well? And if we can't advocate well, how are we going to be part of a team and also ensure patient safety? So it really starts, which is why I spent so much time on that. And when we talk about communication, this is one of my favorite quotes. The biggest problem with communication is the illusion it took place. We have a lot of assumptions that communication actually happened, which is why it's important to spend time on this. There is, as I shared with you earlier, direct data that connects. It was a study called Silence Kills that said by not speaking up, errors occurred and harm occurred to the patient. They followed this study up 5 years later, And what they found is 85% of the workers got the warning from tools that were added to our environment, like physician order entry on our electronic records, shift handoff, structured shift handoff, other types of safety strategies. But the sad part is, 58% said they got the warning, but they didn't speak up. And half of the reason why they didn't speak up was that disrespect I talked to you about. Now, the exciting piece about this data is the 16% of the people that spoke up were the happiest in their job. So it gives you good reason to now start being more vocal. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. If you are silent about what's going on with your patient and you're not able to advocate, you get that pit, then you go home and you go, and it makes it worse the next day. And that continues in your career if you don't actively stop, if that's a behavior. Now, back in the day, because I'm old, I did not have an official culture assessment. So this is what I used. So I'm going to do an exercise with you guys. And you all remember being in school, right? So may I ask, in school, do you grade on a bell-shaped curve? So people that get 100% don't mess everybody up? Yeah, so you all know bell-shaped curve. So in our units, so in school, we didn't like these people over here because they made our B and C look bad. But in a unit, we like these people. They're the positrons. Come on, guys, this will be all right. We can make it happen. And a little secret, positrons come to conferences. Then on the other side of the bell-shaped curve, you have individuals that are called negatoids. Dig their feet in and go, I am not going. I don't want to do that. No. Do any of you know negatoids? And then you have the people that are in between. They're called tweeners. So I have a question to ask. In your unit, who is winning? Tweeners. That means you got an even number of positrons and negatoids. Most units, I'll be honest with you, most units have one or two true negatoids. Let me define that for you. A true negatoid is a person that never participates and only complains. Everybody know one or two of those? Yeah. So the only thing that needs to happen to them is they shut up or they leave. Because none of us are going, I don't want to work in a negative environment today, right? So that's the goal. The problem is, and here's the challenge, I may wake up in the morning or wake up in the evening and go, oh, so-and-so's working today, it's gonna be, right? All right, geez, never seen the world over. And I go into work and I complain about benefits that were changed 2 years ago instead of addressing that human that is causing me all the problems. We ignore it, we don't face it. So that's something we have to do. So I'm gonna give you some strategies. So when that person, and by the way, they're like, they'll follow you to the toilet, the equipment room, they'll be in your ear. So as they do that, you need to say, how are you gonna participate in fixing it? If you fail to say that statement, and you listen to the negatoid, you are validating their behavior and they will continue. I will make you a promise, because you're going to have my email address. I will make you a promise. You do this twice to a negatoid. If they come to you the third time, I want you to email me. Because it won't happen. They will go to somebody else. But if everybody in the culture does this, then they shut up or they leave as a part of it. Because they are very vocal and they can bring a bunch of tweeners to this side. And you don't want that. You want to move in this way. And by the way, guys, I know I told you I only have one or two negatoids. in an average unit. I had 14 when I walked into my first culture. That's why I had to figure this all out, because it was not pretty. So, if you remember this quote, it will make sense. If you permit it, you promote it. So if you permit a behavior, a communication, you're going to promote doing that, allowing that person to continue to do it. And the other communication, so I gave you how to address yelling. I now gave you how to address in your ear. The third one is when somebody is talking negatively about another human being. What should be the first thing out of your mouth? And it's not tell me more. Have you talked to so-and-so? You coach, go into your teaching, coaching mode as a nurse and say, have you talked to so-and-so? And if they want to tell you the story, put your hands out, not my business, and walk away. Now, if they need coaching or help with the communication, that's a different thing, and you guys recognize the difference between gossip and assisting somebody as a part of it. But these are very easy communication strategies to begin to start to manage your culture more effectively. So, what do I do about that communication? Guys, there's training. There's a thing called Crucial Conversations. It's available. You can buy it off Google. You can put it on your MP4. You can listen to it on the way to work. You can ask your organizations to support training in this. Because they train on heart failure, don't they? They train on COPD. Wouldn't it be lovely if the entire organization got trained on communication? Including our physician colleagues, radiology, everybody as a part of that journey. Do me a favor, deal with inappropriate communication real time. Do not go home without addressing it, because what will happen? Exactly. Make it as transparent as possible, zero tolerance policy. And I experienced this myself. So I had somebody that was inappropriately, she was at my peer level, inappropriately communicating with me. I addressed it with her twice, no response. I went to our boss. That was also her boss. We had a three-way. Same thing, happened twice. And the third time it happened, she's yelling at me on the phone. I hung up, I made my statement, turned around, wrote her up for a customer one violation of verbal abuse. I worked with her for 6 more years and never had another problem. Bingo. And we have to take more control over that. Now, there is a strategy. Anybody work with surgeons? Excuse me. Sorry, I don't mean to point out particular individuals, but they're known for throwing things. He's over here. So there is an intervention. It's called either a code green or a code white, and it has been published. And that is where the nurse calls a code green or code white when they're being yelled at with stuff throwing, and the entire staff come out and surround them. It's very powerful. And then they all turn around and walk away. Yep. Shut it down. Shut the behavior down. It's been very effective. So, some things to add to your journey. What about leadership communication? It's really important. Have them be part of that shared governance. They need to be visible to the staff for questions. They need to solicit opinions, and there are many ways to do this. Are you guys using the technology of huddles, shift huddles? No. So this is one that has improved communication in the United States greatly, and that is at the beginning of the shift, the entire staff huddle. Awesome. So this is something to think about in your various areas, and you guys can collectively talk about what you want to be in that huddle. Sometimes the harm that occurred on a patient in the last 24 hours is in that huddle. Some things that may come from upper leadership may be in that huddle. Also, identification of patients who are at huge risk for potential injury in the unit are in that huddle. So many things. Also, newsletters, email, bulletin boards, there's all different ways, and you have to use multimodal communication as a part of it. So I just stuck that in there again. What about recognition strategies? How are you recognized for the contribution you make besides getting money in your paycheck? Because this is part of the healthy work culture. Anybody come around and say, good job? They do, that's good. That's an important form of recognition. There are national recognitions, and I believe the Daisy Award is international. Have you guys heard of the Daisy Award? Let me check, let me find out if that's international or not. But one of the things that we did in our environment, it was a neonatal ICU nurse that then wanted to work adult. And she said, we had a program called the Warm and Fuzzy. And it worked really well on staff recognition. So basically what it was is if you went above and beyond to help your buddy, you know, whether it was a respiratory therapist, a nurse, a ward tech, whatever, you wrote a little note and you put it in a box in the conference room. And then at the end of the month, the notes were stapled to a bag of candy and then went in your mailbox. So I will tell you, she took major flack for that. She brought it to the Unit Governance Council and they're all like, eh. And she's like, oh, I should never have done this. I said, just wait, because the minute they get the paper and the candy in their open mailboxes, they're gonna be happy. And that's exactly what happened. And the people who didn't get it in their mailbox, you know, and I'm like, okay. But it was something very simple. So the leadership, we paid for the candy for 2 months. That's it. Afterwards, they paid for their own candy to give to themselves. And we started it up to get them going as a part of that journey. So provide opportunities for staff for growth, this kind of development. Is there support for you guys to go back to the schools for a higher degree and things like that, which is great. In your organization, do the families write letters back about the care? If that happens, they need to be posted so the whole staff can see it. Because that's important for you to know. Because usually we take care of them and off they go, and we don't get to close the circle. And one of the things that we created, because I was in a medical ICU where the mortality is higher, we created a bereavement program where we followed families out for a year. We sent them a sympathy card at 2 weeks. We got information at time of death, sympathy card at 2 weeks, a phone call at 6 weeks, a letter at 6 months, and a letter at a year. So not only did it help our families, it closed the circle of grief for the staff. Because when they were writing things, they talked about the patient and the experience in the family, so it really helped them stay emotionally sound through this process. And written acknowledgement by leadership about contributions that you may have done is important. So it's really about busting this puppy up. New rules, break down the walls, and by the way, if you look close enough, I still have dents in my head from doing this with my unit as a part of it. And it's about shifting the culture from individual blame to looking at trends in the system. We were known as the unit that submitted the most incident reports because it was not related to a person, it was about trending data so we could improve the care. It was a different way of looking at it. So when I did my initial assessment, so I'm gonna put this in, this was in 1990, but I still see this everywhere in the country. All the reward structure for the nurses was based on their medical component of their practice. They picked up the rails in the lungs, they went to the doctor said, here, make sure you give them Lasix, the pulmonary edema went away, good job. There was no good job for getting the patient up sitting in a chair. Nobody came by and gave them a high five and go, that looks awesome. That kind of, there wasn't a reward structure for that. So the medical model, it was a pure medical model of decision-making, and the reward structure was based on that. These were our clinical indicators of nursing at the time. 23% pressure injury rate, limited use of mobility techniques, limited use of having PT, OT, or social work present, complications of foot drop, and crispy critters in all those patients' mouths. I walked into that and I went, So literally, you're not supposed to do anything as a new leader for about 4 to 5 months, and get a lay of the land. Within 2 weeks, I was doing a pressure injury audit. I just couldn't stand it. But I had a staff nurse partnering with me, Ms. Skinners, as a part of it. So these were clearly measures that the absence of fundamental nursing care existed. They did not get reward structures related to that. So the way we improve the value is 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning, still remember this, and when I flipped to nights, I did it on nights, we had a patient care conference. And I negotiated with them. I said, some of it will be medical, some of it will be nursing, because I knew they would never come if it was just nursing. So, first couple of times, ARDS, sepsis, mediators, all of this, quoting research, and the first time, only one person came. But then they went back in the lunchroom, and they said, wow, that was really good, you may want to think about coming. So we started again, and then I flipped over to skin, family coping, ethics, all sorts of other things, to the point where, and we also did role modeling and bedside consultation as a part of it. And then, of course, we had the clinical ladder. That was a piece of it. So the patient care conferences, as I said, we alternated between a medical focus and a nursing therapeutics. It ultimately involved this. 2 years into it, the nurses came to me and said, we don't want to do the medicine side of this anymore, we just want to do nursing. I was like, yeah, because they get the medicine side in the rounds with the multidisciplinary team. And they said, let's create a format. And so we created a rounds format focusing on what nursing impacted. And then that was shared in the medical round so that nursing articulated in those multidisciplinary rounds the components of our practice that were significant to patient outcomes as a part of it. So what it did, it reinforced the ownership of nursing practice. It was a reward structure. Good pickup. That was awesome. So it gave us a way for that recognition, enhanced the continuity of care because everybody then knew those components, and it also helped build the intellectual confidence of the baby nurse because we supported them in that journey as a part of it. Bedside consultation for me was the funnest. Coming to the bedside, asking questions, seeing their knowledge, making the connections happen, and showing them how they can make an impact in care. And oftentimes it created what I like to call the aha experience. The light bulb goes off as a part of it. And then it also created changes in practice. So medical ICUs are known for managing diarrhea. Just saying. We've got all the strategies, looking at all the various components. But what we discovered through our nursing rounds was that nobody managed constipation. Because nobody wants anything coming out of that end during their 8 hours. And they're more than happy to say, no bowel movement, with a smile, no bowel movement, and before you know it, you got 72 hours of no bowel movement. So our nursing group brought this to our unit governance council. They said, let's do a quality improvement. We evaluated 25 patients, found that nobody had any history of what their bowels were like and all of that, but our patients, when they were coming to us, they weren't really aware. Some didn't have families. So we worked with pharmacy and created a bowel protocol. And I will tell you, this was in 1995. That protocol is still in existence in the NICU. You get Seneca for the first 2 days, and on the third day, you don't want to be the nurse working. because it's the adventure of the enema followed by K-oxalate. On the medical side, we didn't forget it. We included in-services, journal clubs, self-study modules, and I also did bedside consultation related to medical interventions. So on the process improvement projects, I never did a project by myself. There was always a frontline staff nurse partnered with me on the project because I didn't want it coming from me. I wanted it coming from them. Staff led, designed, and implemented, and as a result, it developed in ownership and pride. So we have literally had multiple speakers at the National Critical Care and the American Association of Critical Care Nurses, staff nurses up there speaking about the bereavement program. We had one present her research at the Society of Critical Care Medicine. So that brings a lot of energy back to the unit as a part of that. And then measuring clinical and financial outcomes as a part of it. So these were some of the things we did. Standards of practice, reduction of pressure injuries, the bowel protocol. So, you know, delirium, and, agitation, and pain, 1993. And it was brought by nursing to the Multidisciplinary Quality Committee. And the reason why is because our residents were giving these people that had substance abuse issues 1 milligram of Ativan, which didn't touch their baby toe, so the safety of the patient was challenged. And so we brought a psychiatrist in on this, our medical intensivist colleagues, as well as nursing to create protocols on that. The warm and fuzzy program I told you about, and then a whole host of policies and procedures focused on fundamental nursing care, continuous lateral rotation and prone positioning, oral care, bathing, hair, heels for pressure injury, all nursing. And we didn't just do it at our unit level, those were all done at the hospital level, but started from problems in our unit as a part of it. And then staff-led research, cooling by convection, noise reduction, and the bereavement program, and those were the things that were presented either regionally or nationally as a part of it. So how do you measure staff empowerment and engagement? Retention of qualified staff. And now that's even more important than before. But I will tell you, nursing shortages are cyclical as a part of it. So just to give you an idea, in 1996, we had 42%, because in the United States, not everybody has a BSN, just to let you know. We haven't figured that one out. In terms of the number of clinical nurse 1s, 2s, and 3s, you can see we had 60% here. You can see our BSN rate increased, and we had more in the higher levels of the clinical ladder, showing the evolution there. This is tough to read, so I'm just going to give it to you. By the way, the 24% turnover rate, the highest at year 3, those were the negatoids going bye-bye. And I was okay with that as the turnover. But as you can see, the turnover rate was between 6 and 8%. The average in the country was 18 at that time. So we put money to it, and in 5 years, we saved $2 million of orientation by holding on to our staff. And we wanted to find out in those 5 years why they left, and what we were focused on was this. Only 12% went to a same-city ICU. So that basically told us all the other ones we don't know. If people want careers or they move somewhere, you know, outside the area, but if they go to a same city ICU, then we know there was a challenge. So, and then you measure it by how staff are engaging in the process. So, bereavement program, like I shared with you, engagement in the shared governance, and then interesting enough, we had to hire a new manager. The staff were involved in the design of the interview tool, as well as the interview. We hired a nurse educator, same thing, we had 7 people going for the position. They created the tool in conjunction with leadership. And then, so for me, the recipe for success, Have a vision, we did. Pursuing that change with unwavering focus on patient safety. Create that culture of respect. As nurses, be visible. Be visible, be vocal. Promotion of autonomy, support that shared decision-making. Create that practice committee. Interprofessional rounds and team building, be a part of that process. In your interdisciplinary rounds, does nursing have a script that they communicate certain things during the rounds? Yes, so in some places yes, in some places no. I will tell you, that's how we finally made it changed in the United States. And that script includes the A through F bundle, and it includes skin, and the various lines about, do they still need the catheter, do they still need, and also nutrition is in there as well. So you can always email me, you're gonna have my email address. You can always email me and I'll share you examples if you're interested in that as a part of it. So I would ask you guys, when would now be a good time to do this? It's not enough for us to do our best. We gotta know what to do and then be able to do our best as a part of it. So I'm gonna, it looks like we have how much time for questions? 10 minutes. Did you find this helpful? Yeah. For the souls that came in a little later, this presentation is going to be on my website. So you just have to remember my last name, Bowman. Put it in Google. Yes, you can Google me. However, if you just put in Bowman, some author from California took over the top spot, and I didn't pay to get it back. So you have to put Kathleen in there, and then it'll come up. And my website, it'll be, give me a couple hours, it'll be under the education section, under downloads. So that you'll have all the material you need. Questions, don't be shy. Oh, thank you. So the question was asked, what was the impact of COVID? It wiped out all of it. Literally, I'm spending time across the country and across the world rebuilding cultures. And that's literally what is having to happen. And the problem is the cultures we're rebuilding are with nurses that trained during COVID. Because a lot of the senior ones left. And so there's not a lot of senior people to help the younger ones. And the younger ones were trained on mannequins and not on real people. And then the younger ones also are used to communicating on phones. So they're having real trouble talking to patients, doing patient education, and really having those important conversations. So those are some of the challenges. Are you guys seeing the same thing? Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. So I literally have talks called Rebooting the Culture. Because of that, yeah.
Dr. Bowman, thank you so much for being here. Presume there's an Irish root there, Kathleen.
That would be correct. My mother's maiden name's McGovern. County Cavan, by the way. I've been there.
Well, I was really proud of tips, fantastic. I just wondered about groups, in particular eyes roll, how it's really different to do it, and all the things you're saying is someone's a bit more courageous and one-to-one from the ICU, absolutely corner, or people that just pick up the courage there to confront. If you're in a team meeting, I'm sure you feel it.
So, yeah, so in a team meeting, it's tough. Now, if it's a verbal thing, it's much easier to do. What I will do usually after the team meeting, I'll have a private conversation with them about, by the way, multiple times throughout this, you rolled your eyes when things were being spoken related to this and this. Not sure you're aware that's happening, but we all sort of know what that means. So, and it's the same if it's in multidisciplinary rounds, except if there is yelling. If there's yelling and tone, I take care of it right away. The other subtle ones, I tend to do privately. But I remember one time, this is interesting because this is how you foster that environment. Two things two separate things. One, a plastic surgeon was in, washed their hands going in, put the gloves on, took the dressing off the belly, poked around, took the gloves off, walked off without washing their hands. And the nurse was like, excuse me, and this is also, there were like about 10 residents with her. And the nurse goes, excuse me, you needed to wash your hands after you took the gloves off. And the plastic surgeon went off on the nurse. And the nurse held her ground, but she then immediately contacted myself and the nurse manager. We were not successful at getting the plastic surgeon to physically come back to the unit, but we got her on the phone and she apologized to that registered nurse. That's the level of commitment you have to make for the respect. Same thing happened with the chief of thoracic surgery. Went off on the nurse in the patient room. That nurse was one of my senior strong ones. She said, let's take it out here in the hallway. We saw it happening all the way up to chief of surgery, because that's who they fell under. And he had to apologize. That is how you create the environment of respect and holding people accountable for behavior. You have to take, the local leadership has to take ownership of protecting their staff and showing them that they will be backed up when they do the right thing. And it shows up. So one of the science things on CAUTI is a nurse-driven removal protocol based on indications. I can guarantee you if a nurse pulls one out, appropriate on the indications, and the doctor yells, she'll never use the protocol again. Unless the manager steps in, says you followed the protocol exactly, and goes and has a crucial conversation with that physician. Then it will continue. So a lot of the things we do really, that's why I shared with you how important local leadership is to the success of the culture that you're working to create. But it's also up to the frontline staff to hold that local leadership accountable for that communication. And if it's not happening, if that local leadership is not doing what they need to do to create that environment, then you gotta move, just like you move up other chains of command, you gotta move up, and I know it's not easy, trust me. You heard the conversation I had with CNN. None of this stuff is easy. But how it makes you feel once you've completed it, I can't tell you how much confidence and strength it gives you to do the right thing the next time as well. And by the way, you guys will have my email. So anything we talked about, if you want more information about it, that bell-shaped curve fun exercise, I have that all written up. So you can do it with your staff to see how they answered the tweener question. Because again, you gotta know what kind of culture you live in order to get started on changing it if you need to. Alrighty, break. It's good for people to be able to victory in between, especially if you had coffee or water.
We will have 20 minutes.
Oh, there you go.
And we will start at 7:20. We will have the refreshments at 20.
Oh, yay. Awesome, thanks everyone. And I look forward to seeing you if you're participating in the rest of the conference as well.